Hey everyone, and welcome back to r/ProRevenge. Local hero sticks it to City Hall. This happened quite a few years ago, where my hometown is. It's a thing called ALR, Agriculture Land Reserve. Basically, there are areas of land that can only ever be used for agriculture, in order to protect prime agriculture land from becoming highways and strip malls and things like that. A friend of a friend, let's call him Fred, had inherited a piece of such land on the outskirts of the city. He had no interest in doing any kind of farming, but the ALR rules allow for the property owner to have a personal residence on the land, so he built a house on it and had a nice place to live just outside of town. Now, City Hall has ways of acquiring ALR land and using it for non-agriculture purposes. I'm not familiar with how exactly, but they can, and it is about impossible for anybody else to. One thing the city would do is acquire ALR land and turn it into condo developments. They had a vision for 3 high-end condos to be built where Fred's property was. They had already bought the properties on either side of Fred's land and were going after his too. The city was only offering Fred the property value, and since he just built a house there, he would be losing on the deal, so Fred said no. While the condos on either side of Fred were being constructed, the city used every tool they could try and expropriate Fred's land, but the ALR restrictions made it tricky. Finally, they told Fred that since his land was ALR, he needed to be using it for agriculture within 30 days or they could take it from him. Fred's response? Pig farm! He crammed as many pigs onto his property that he legally could, full compliance with farming regulations, health and safety, whole 9 yards. Since he had fulfilled his obligations with the ALR, the city could not touch him, period. The city had already pre-sold a number of these condos, and naturally, none of the buyers were very happy to have spent a small fortune to live next to a big stinky pig farm. Most of the buyers obtained grounds for dismissal on their purchase agreements, while the rest filed a big lawsuit. The city's project was sinking fast. The city started negotiating with Fred, and the story ends with the city finally making Fred an offer for his land that was so ridiculous he had no choice but to accept. The city finishing their condo project, but thanks to Fred, they did not make nearly as much off of it as they had anticipated. Refuse to pay $400? Lose over $4,000. I work in a hobby shop that mostly sells stuff related to RC. The store is about a block away from a school, so we have a lot of kids that come by. One day, one of our frequent customers, NK, comes in with his rock crawler, asking if the warranty would cover the damage. The front end of the car is completely destroyed, to the point where I doubted any of the car could be salvageable. I ask him how this happened. He mumbles something along the lines of, "I just crashed it, you know?" Unfortunately, the warranty wouldn't cover that. I inform him of such, and he just completely breaks down. I talked to him and got him to calm down. He wiped his eyes and told me the tale of what had happened to it. Nearby, there is a little open area of forest. It's got a shallow stream, a few fallen logs, and plenty of boulders. This is an area that is an absolute dream, and is a well-kept secret among the RC enthusiasts in our area. Or at least, it was. NK had been having some trouble in school with a group of bullies. The day prior, NK had gone out to the woods, and unbeknownst to him, he was followed by the ringleader of the bully group, ET. NK was minding his own business when the ET came running into the clearing and smashed the car a few times with a baseball bat. Now, the car NK had was really nice. I mean really nice. If I remember correctly, it was the 6x6 Beast from RC4WD. This car costs about $400, and with the modifications NK made, it was easily worth something in the $1,000 range. He had been saving for years to be able to afford it, which was why he had the warranty in the first place. I told NK to wait there, and I went to go talk with my boss. My boss had been into the hobby since he was about 10 and completely understood NK's situation, but we couldn't cover the cost alone. I then had a bright idea. What if we contacted ET's parents? We could get them to cover half, and we could cover the rest. ET came in sometimes to buy spray paint, and had tried to steal some a few times, so we had his parents' phone number on file. I called them up and explained to his parents what had happened. She was completely understanding and said she would bring E.T. over to discuss this later in the afternoon. They arrive shortly after, and I bring them into the back, where I have my manager and NK sitting at a table. I explain the situation, and the ensuing conversation goes something like this. Me: I'm sorry to have to bring you into this, ma'am, but your son damaged NK's car pretty badly, and we need you to cover some of the cost. TM: I completely understand. I'm sure E.T. didn't mean to do that, but I'm willing to help reimburse the cost. I ignore the comment about E.T. and continued. Me: So I've got the receipts from NK's purchases of the parts damaged, and we need you to cover about $400 worth of parts. Does that sound reasonable? E.T: I didn't damage it that bad. TM: That's impossible. I can get an RC car like that at Walmart for $50. Boss: Yes, but this sort of thing is much higher quality, and we have grounds to ask you for the full price of the vehicle. We are being extremely generous by only asking $400. We have proof of the cost if you like. TM: I'm not paying that. Take $20 and I'm leaving. Boss: Ma'am, we can take this to a small claims court if needs be. TM: Well now, I'm not paying anything. Just replace it and I'll be on my way. And with that, TM and her hell child left. My boss got in contact with a lawyer and talked with him about it. He was told that without concrete evidence of E.T. damaging the car, we didn't have a leg to stand on. So boss and I hatched a plan. We informed NK of our plan. He got a huge grin on his face and offered to help. We have lots of spare parts around, and NK had an extra body for the beast. We took an old chassis, extended it with some plywood, and mount the body to it. We slap on some cheap electronics, hardware, and importantly, a GoPro and a can of spray paint. We then get into contact with some of the other kids that regularly come to the shop, and it is made clear that E.T. doing this was not an isolated incident. We discover that he even did this to adults. Perfect. NK enters the woods to set the trap. He drove the car around a bit, and soon enough, E.T. appears, baseball bat in hand. He tells NK that he's gonna pay and proceeds to smash this car again, stating that the shop won't replace it now. The spray paint can bursts, and E.T. is covered in paint. He screams and runs away. The next day, TM is in with E.T., saying how she is going to sue us for aggravated assault, and that she is going to make us pay for what we did. So we took it to court. We now had evidence that E.T. smashes other people's RC cars, and we even managed to get testimonials from a few of the people that E.T. had done this to before. TM tried to use the spray paint trap as something like intentional assault, but she had no foot to stand on, and the judge ruled that it was self-defense. The case was ruled in our favor, and TM was forced to pay about $1,200 for the cost of the car and damages. But best of all, she also had to pay over $3,000 to cover the damage E.T. had done to the other people's cars. Bully my grandpa? Well, enjoy being stuck in a poop pit. My grandpa grew up in rural Iowa. I'm not going to say where exactly, but Iowa is basically all cornfields anyway. So yeah, probably got a mental image in your head already. He was always a stand-up guy, and despite this happening over 70 years ago at this point, you can still hear people speak very highly of the Boy Scout of a man that my grandpa was. I sincerely wish I knew him. At this point, my grandpa was in his junior year of high school, and despite being well loved in his community, he had his bully. Everyone has that one bully. His bully, though, just seemed to be a jerk to everyone. Teachers, parents, kids. Heck, there was even a small town cop fresh to the force who got bullied at one point, which would probably go under entitled people if I make another post about it when I ended up meeting this jerkhead. No one seemed to stand up to this stupid little high schooler that thought he knew everything. It got to the point where he'd go out of his way to brag about it to people. This did not set right with my grandpa, but he didn't really know how to stand up to him without making things worse when it came to how he was being bullied. But one day, mistakes were made. My grandpa was getting a pop at a gas station with his friends, and this particular gas station had a restaurant attached. Since it was a good spot for people to pass through, on road trips or for a truck stop. And in the restaurant was the bully laughing loudly with his little Weasley friends. My grandpa listened, just sipping his drink, and heard that they were going to pull a prank on an elderly woman that owned a farmhouse nearby. This woman's house wasn't in town, since her family had built the house long ago and worked the land around it. She was widowed, her children had moved away, and she hired people to help her maintain the place. Despite her age, I've been told that she was still a Spitfire and insisted on doing a lot of the farming herself. The main issue with her health was heavy lifting. Anyway, back to the supposed prank. This woman didn't have indoor plumbing, which meant that she had got water from a spigot near her house and that she had an outhouse instead of a normal bathroom that we had today. For those of you that aren't entirely aware of how Iowa farm outhouses work, it's basically a big pit in the ground that someone digs, and then they stick a wooden shack on top of it. The shack then has a seat with a hole in it for a person to relieve themselves in. The bullies were going to wait until the dead of night so they could tip the outhouse over. My grandpa was furious when he heard this. He had been hired before by her for summer work and knew that she was a strict but kind woman that didn't deserve to be treated like that. Because when your only outhouse is tipped over and you gotta go, there's no way you're gonna be able to lift it, and there's no way to safely crouch next to the hole without falling in. So my grandpa did the right thing and immediately went with his friends to tell the old lady what was being planned. They expected her to be furious when they told her the story, but instead she sipped her coffee and gave them a chilling smile. Let them, but we'll have a surprise for them. And she let them in on a plan to make sure that things wouldn't go as far as the bullies had planned. That night, my grandpa and his friends, telling their parents that they were at one another's house to hang out, all gathered at the old woman's house, munching on some cookies and pumpkin bread. My grandpa got the recipe off her, and it's an amazing recipe that my family uses to this day, and waited. At around 11 o'clock, they heard disgusted screams from the direction of the outhouse. You see, the way that the yard was set up was so that there was only one way to get into the yard and still have enough room to take a running start to tip the outhouse over. My grandpa and his friends didn't tip the outhouse over, but they did move it over about 5 feet and lightly covered the now exposed hole in excess corn stalks from the harvest. The screams were from my grandpa's bully being waist deep in human excrement. The bully's friends were frozen in place by the gate they came in, and the old woman immediately turned on the lights and started yelling that if they didn't get off her property that minute, that she was going to call the police. My grandpa and his friends waited inside and heard the whole thing, laughing when they heard the pitiful cries from the crap pit and the running of feet from the co-conspirators. Wouldn't you know it, he couldn't get out himself, and since he wasn't getting off her property, she called the police. My grandpa and his friends watched from a window as the Poop Fiend was dragged out of his rancid prison and made to go to the police station to explain just what he was doing. He wasn't an adult, so he wasn't charged, from what I was told, but word got out around school and his last 2 years of high school were absolute crap. No one knew it was Grandpa and the old lady, never told a soul. Thank you, old lady. May you rest in peace, you wonderful woman. Cheat on me? I'll end your new relationship 8 years later. I started dating this girl, let's call her Susan, from like 12 years ago. When we met, she had 2 kids, we can call them John and Sarah, from a previous relationship, and I was fine with that. We really had a great time, and I became like an extra father figure to them. However, after we had been a couple for about 4 years, I found out Susan had an affair, so I dumped her. 2 months later, a mutual friend of ours told me Susan had moved in together with her new boyfriend, Jeff. And about a year later, they got a baby. And that was that. I forgot about her and moved on with my life. But a couple months ago, she pops up on Instagram as a friend suggestion. Since she has an open account, I went through her pictures and managed to find out her boyfriend's account. You know, Jeff, who she moved in with right after we broke up. He also has an open account, so I thought I would play them a little prank. I know Susan is really jealous, so I created a fake account on Instagram and named the fake user Sarah, just like one of Susan's kids, but with another surname. I kept the account private, but I uploaded some random images and got some follow for follow followers just to make it look like an authentic active account. And then I started to bombard Jeff's posts with comments on how nice he was looking and giving him all sorts of compliments. The setup was quite simple since Jeff is a spinning instructor, so I made it look like Sarah was attending his classes. The reasons I gave the fake user the same name as Susan's daughter was because if she swallowed the bait, she would always think of the girl flirting with Jeff every time she thought of her daughter. As I said, Susan is jealous, really jealous, and the plan seemed to have worked better than I expected. Just now I spoke to our mutual friend and I learned Jeff and Susan broke up and moved apart because Jeff had an affair. You know, when I listen to some of these stories, I'm just kind of appalled at how, the lengths that people go to get their revenge. But then again, that's why this is called ProRevenge, so that's where these stories go. So, thank you guys for listening to these stories. If you like them, leave a like at the bottom, and subscribe to the channel for more daily Reddit content. See you in the next video.